If I was to guesstimate, I think about a mile. It's not far. It's not far from here at all.
Is it in the middle of kind of a black community here?
It's actually on the edge of what used to be just the black community.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I'm 47, so when I was growing up here, the railroad still divided the white side from the black side. So Garrett Road, which turns into I think that's 2nd Street that runs downtown. Front Street that runs downtown. So that railroad, Garrett Road, Railroad, and then Front Street goes into downtown. From my understanding, when the Indianola Freedom House was being used, that Front Street wasn't there. That it was a dead end right at the road where my grandfather's house was. And so that was one of the factors that contributed to them not being able to bomb the house like they wanted to. That's what I was told. Yeah. But it's not far from here, which is good.
What do you want the takeaway to be for this evening?
The takeaway is that I want the community to get more involved. I want to get the word out to Indianola. Like I said, I grew up here. The house is in my family. I didn't know anything about Freedom House. Didn't know anything about my family being involved with the civil rights movement. Understandably so. That was a rough time. People are still traumatized. The people that are still living are still traumatized from living through that era. So I would like for the community to know more about the Freedom House. We had volunteers from Mississippi Valley State to come through and do some help with the cleaning up. And those, I guess I could say children now. Those children were so intrigued by the history of that house. And it wasn't like, they're just asking to be asking questions. They really were curious. So I was glad to see that, glad to experience that. So that I would say that would be my major takeaway, for people to learn about the Indianola Freedom House, the people that were involved in the civil rights movement during that time that are still living in this community, and to carry that story on and pass it on to, future generations.
Historically, you were talking about the infrastructure. So what other infrastructure, the new piece that you put in, the flooring, or what else would you like to see inside of the house to commemorate the work of your grandfather?
The inside, well, I'm going to have to get with Miss Margaret Kibbe, who was in the video, whoever else was around that was inside the house during that time, to let me know or tell me what was where. From the way it's laid out now, and from what I remember as a little girl, you had the kitchen. The kitchen needs to be totally repaired. The bathroom needs to be totally repaired. And there's a back bedroom that the floor needs to be repaired. So, but as far as like other things, like where they had desks or who was here or what was there, I would have to get with somebody who actually was there during those times to tell me. Because the house, when I was a child, the house was used as rental property. So that's all I ever known it was until Ms. Zellie Orr, before I even met her, a mutual friend told me that, well, no, let me back up, I'm sorry. Before I met her, when I was living in Atlanta, she actually started this whole process. I need to go back to the very beginning. I guess she's the one responsible for making helping get Bears Den be recognized as a historical district. So my mom reached out to me while I was in Atlanta and told me about my grandfather's house. That's the first time I had ever heard of this whole thing about the Indianola Freedom House. So fast forward, here we are. So I would say Zellie Orr is the one very responsible for this entire thing coming to fruition. And she's moving back. So
Wow.
oh, wow. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because I get long-winded.
Does anybody else have questions for Felicia? or just a comment that you want to make about the film or the, ideas that you have for what the future could hold?
Dr. King, what can the Indianola citizens do, those people who are interested and believe in what you're doing? How can they contribute to help you reach your mission?
They can reach out. How they can help is, well, if they have some resources, and when I say resources, I don't necessarily mean money. It could be, they could have had an aunt, uncle, or they could have been actually involved during the civil rights movement in Indianola to share their stories. Because as Lottie said before, we're still collecting stories about what happened. I wasn't there, I think that's a major contribution. I'm in the process of starting a nonprofit. So once that gets going, of course, monetary donations. So did I answer your question?
For those people who are not around.
Okay.
For those people who are not around during 1965.
For those who weren't around during that time, I would say if they just bring their eagerness to learn about what happened and to share the information with the younger generations and among their peers. Yeah.
How was the initial connection made with the Mississippi Heritage, is it, organization?
Mississippi Heritage Trust.
Who reached out to who?
Let me see. Let me yeah. So I got connected with Miss Zellie Orr years after I moved back home. And then I got connected with Dr. Stacy White. And then I think she connected me with Dr. Timla Washington. And then Dr. Timla Washington introduced me to Lottie Rash. So that's how that connection came around.
Okay.
And Lottie Rash is the executive director of the Mississippi Heritage Trust.
Awesome.
And so from that conversation, we have a program called the 10 Most Endangered Historic Places in Mississippi. And in 2019, we listed Mississippi's Freedom Houses as one of our endangered places, a category. And a lot of that dialogue was related to the Indianola Freedom House because it is an incredible story. The city of Indianola has done a lot of work related to documenting their civil rights history that you don't necessarily see all around the state. Dr. White has done a wonderful driving tour that documents a lot of that history. So you're building on a strength in this town already, And what could this be that could continue to tell that story? So we talked a lot about the Indianola Freedom House as part of that 10 Most Endangered Historic Places announcement. And truthfully, you can talk big picture all you want. It boils down to the individual. Felicia has just been a great partner to work with. She wants to see something positive happen in her community that perpetuates this legacy of civil rights and social justice that are attached to the history of that house. And so we as an organization want to foster that. What can we do to help? And we've just been very fortunate to have partners like the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area that see that too. How can we do it? So through funding, we started this process of collecting oral histories with the long-term goal of it maybe becoming a film, Right now it was only 8 minutes, but you never know, Chandler, right?
8 hours of interviews.
8 hours of interviews, so we'll have to come back for that one. So our role as an organization is to find support for Felicia and her larger goals of what do I do with this house.
Will we be able to see the film one more time?
If y'all want to, we have some refreshments. So if you're ready, are we? Okay. Well, we would love to continue this conversation. So if you would like a glass of wine, or I don't know, I'm predicting cheese crackers. I don't know, but it's right in that little vestibule. And what we'll do, Chandler, if you're okay with that, we'll go ahead and cue up the film one more time. And if you want to hang out and watch it, it's very wonderfully done and so moving. I hadn't seen it till tonight either, so I'm real.
Is it okay to film it? Or, okay, thank you.
And
Thank you guys so much for coming and being a part of this process, and we're just excited about what the future holds.
my name is Felicia King. I'm from Indianola, Mississippi, and I am the granddaughter of Estelle Ty King. The restoration of the Indianola Freedom House started when there was a spark inside of me when I moved back to Indianola, Mississippi, and I learned that my grandfather's house was used as a freedom house during the civil rights movement of the late 1960s. There were many organizations, you had COFO, you had SNCC. They met there to strategize, to send people out to canvass the community, to get people registered to vote, to educate them on their right to vote. So what's at stake for the Freedom House right now is, it is making sure that the roof is repaired and the floors are repaired.
I remember this was our headquarters or our office before I got here, from June of 1965 through December of 1965. This office was made available to us after the fire bombings. And Mr. King opened it up and said, we can have it. Yes, this was sort of your replacement meeting spot for those who were doing the civil rights work, who were doing the vote registration. This was the place that replaced the office that was at the Freedom School that burned. There was a mimeograph machine right there in that corner. We had a big sort of table-like bench. You could sit on it or you could sit up to it, because we used to play Monopoly on it. It sat right here. The floor, if I recall, was wood. This would have been the original floor that went all through the building. It'd be neat if you could take it back to what it was. Take out the bathtub, eliminate the kitchen, raise that counter a little bit, plain wood. I mean, I want Mississippians to be proud of the history that they had here, that Mississippi stuck its neck out and did things that nobody did, against odds that nobody else faced. So, and it's important to understand the people who came here and the people who were here.
Civil rights workers came to town and they had to be housed. And Miss Magruder, she housed people. Miss Giles, them right down the street. And they had a store and their house was burned. They burned down. And it was just like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Mississippi Burning. It was almost like that here, because everywhere you look, something was getting burned down. And the Freedom House was the only one that was left. I can see it being a museum. They can make that something tremendous to the community. And because a whole lot of people probably forgot about it, it's there. And it needs to be talked about. And if you don't talk about it, it will never let anything get done.
And we really, I can speak at least for Bears Inn, and I'm sure with Virginia knowing too, we had to feed them. They didn't have a lot of money. These were college students, so I didn't understand that either. The truth was,
They come to your house and
we were feeding them, and everything.
Irene Magruder was the first African American to open up her home to Freedom Summer volunteers during Freedom Summer in 1964. But there were many other Freedom Summer volunteers who stayed with my great aunt. So her home was considered like an underground railroad for Freedom Summer volunteers. And so they stayed with her until her house was firebombed on May 1st, 1965.
Okay. Increased registration attempt brought violence early on the morning of May 1st. 4 Negro homes were firebombed. No one was injured. The firebombs hit a Freedom House and the homes of 3 other Negroes active in the local movement. One man's home was completely destroyed, as was the home of a local woman. So Mr. Wiley was a man. Miss Magruder
was the woman.
who had first opened her home to civil rights workers. Right workers doused the flames in the Freedom House here, preventing major damage. So that's the King's house.
Because there were 4 buildings that night, but they all were bombed around that same time frame on May 1st, that morning. Miss Magruder's house, which was 2 houses down from where I lived, was most impactful because I knew her well. She'd been in the community since I lived there, and she had a garden. She would say, "Tell your mama, the tomatoes are ready, you know, you come get some tomatoes," but the short of it is, yes, it was a courageous time, but I don't think the history got passed on in the community about these brave people.
I don't think people really understood or understand the price that was paid. People like my great aunt Irene Magruder, Mr. Dudley Wilder, his home was firebombed, the Giles home, Oscar and Alice Giles, the Freedom School and the Freedom Office. All of those establishments and people paid a significant price for us to have the right to vote that we enjoy today. Somebody had to open the door and pave the way, and these people were brave enough to do that.
One of the programs that we do at the B.B. King Museum is we have an ambassadors program. And a part of what we do is teach them the history. I think it's important that the kids in the community get to see themselves in the Freedom House. They can see the things that happened before then, maybe thinking back, what if I was in here? What would I have done at that point? Or how could I have impacted the future? So I can really envision having our ambassadors going into that house. And it's very important that house stands, because that house is a symbol of where everything used to be. You can walk in that house, you can feel the spirit of those people that worked in that house. You can sit there and envision the meetings and all of the things that happened in that house. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together, you know, and so I bring in a piece and somebody else bring in a piece, and I think that's really important.
The Indianola Freedom House helps to hold space to preserve the energy that was poured into helping oppressed people. So it's a viable place that we can tap into to not only preserve it, but to ride it, to stand on the shoulders who came before us to continue the legacy and to continue to help people who need help. We're all here to help each other. So that's what the house needs to be.